Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for week one of BFSG's four-part fall webinar series in 2025. Today, repeating cybersecurity, but with a new team from Charles Schwab. Patrick and Paul and Kyle, would you all like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
I would. Thank you very much, Chad. And thank you to BFSG for hosting us today. We are delighted to be here. For Paul and myself, we work in a part of Schwab that is the advisor services business. So typically we are working with independent registered investment advisory firms like BFSG. So it's a real treat when a firm like BFSG invites us to speak to their clients, and we appreciate your interest in this topic. I will say that I'm based in San Francisco. My colleague Paul is based in Minneapolis. Because of my location, I've actually worked with BFSG on this topic. We've done some cybersecurity work that Kyle may mention, and I'll elaborate on in just a moment. Again, this is really for you, so hope that you brought your questions. We'll stick around really as long as there are questions still left to answer. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, and hey, I'm Paul Ewing, also joining from Schwab. So as Patrick mentioned, I'm based in Minneapolis. Yeah, and he and I work with advisors out in the field, helping them strengthen their cybersecurity program. So very excited to be here with you all today. So bring your questions. This is a forum just for you. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat, and we're gonna do our best to answer those questions. Kyle, I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks, Paul. My name is Kyle Nixon, and been working at BFG for about 12 years now, and I work very closely with our IT and our external sources like Schwab, and very closely to make sure that we're always up, staying ahead of everything on the IT and security front. So it's really important. Definitely really important these days with all kinds of scams and fraud out there. We always want to make sure we're staying ahead of all of that to protect our business and our clients and really all of you.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. And I think just talking to that framework a little bit, I think the reason that it's so powerful for us to be able to bring Patrick and Paul out to kind of help talk to all of our clients is that the last thing I'd ever consider myself is a cybersecurity expert. I could definitely not deliver a presentation, even though we do a ton of training at BFSG, multiple times a year, and phishing test emails to see who clicks on them, and seems to be the same people every time. But with all of that, that's done to help us, safeguard and protect our clients' information too. So you want to kind of talk through that very briefly, Kyle?
Yes, I mean, like I alluded to, I mean, we work very closely with our external IT as well as resources through Schwab and others that help consult and guide us and make sure we're really doing the right thing, the best things that we can do for our clients to make sure we're safeguarding our assets and protecting our data, protecting everyone's data, make sure it's safe.
Awesome. So with that, like I said, we don't have a lot of slides. I will have to put them up at the very end of the presentation just to talk to you about next steps and what's coming up next week. I got to put the disclosure for our compliance team as well. But I'm going to stop sharing screen so that Patrick and Paul get a lot bigger for everybody. And I think where I wanted to start, I mentioned a couple of risks, is just to kind of set the stage and let Patrick and Paul kind of know what you guys are all thinking. Is when you think about cyber risks, right? Which of the following do you believe is the biggest cybersecurity risk to individuals today? It should have just popped up on all of your screens. But things like weak passwords, phishing scams, public Wi-Fi, or malware and viruses, or I'm just really not sure. And that's why I'm here to listen to the experts. And so I'll leave this up for just a few minutes. And with that, I think we did just have Michael Albee join us as a panelist too. I don't know, he has a lot of comments today, but he did work with Kyle, Patrick, and Paul going through all of our risk assessment as well.
Yeah, I'll say hi real quick. Portfolio manager and partner at BFSG, but yes, the least tech savvy person probably on this call. We went through the exercise with Schwab and team to assess our risks and go through that NIST framework that Chad just had up on the screen. So I'll kind of be here to guide, answer any questions along with Kyle that are related to BFSG, but Patrick and Paul will be the experts answering the vast 99% of the questions probably. So I'll be silent here.
Thanks, Mike. So I did just start sharing results so that everybody can see it too. Hopefully, Paul and Patrick can see it.
Yeah.
I think 13% of people say weak passwords, 60% say phishing scams. They're getting really good these days, guys. I mean, it looks like it comes from my family half the time. Public Wi-Fi, only 2%, viruses and malware, 15%, and I'm not sure. That's why I'm here at 10% of attendees so far. So I think with that, this was a great question. I could kick this off. Can the two of you kind of talk about like what you're seeing in the marketplace or what you're seeing and what we all should be thinking about to safeguard our data.
Certainly, Chad, and thanks for putting the poll up. This is a great place to start. It always helps to understand what are we up against? What are we facing? And what are the risks out there? And I want to say to the 60% of you that voted for phishing, you're absolutely right. That is, from the data that we have at Schwab, the number one attack vector, certainly affecting our investment advisor clients and also affecting individuals, whether in the workplace or at home. So we're seeing phishing in roughly 8 out of 10 breaches or data compromises. And I can tell you, I was almost the victim of this. So, the quality and quantity are getting much better. And some think that AI has something to do with that. There are professional industrial parks, if you will, in various parts of the world, West Africa, Southeast Asia. Cambodia has gotten a lot of attention lately, Eastern Europe, but really these crimes can originate in any part of the world. But we're seeing folks with the power of AI craft convincing messages in their native tongue, get perfect translations, often into English and often targeting Americans, and then sending them out at scale. And Chad, you mentioned that some look like they're coming from your family. I mean, these are looking very convincing. And often the problem is compounded by some other factor, some other weak link. So for example, I mentioned that I almost fell victim for a phishing scam. It turned out a friend of mine who had been planning an event for the better part of a year told me to expect an Evite. So one morning, I looked at my email, there was an Evite from this individual. I clicked on it, it opened a website, it asked me to log in, and it just looked different from any other Evite I'd ever gotten. So at that point, when it was asking for username and password, I said, hold on, this doesn't look typical. Even though it's early morning, I haven't really had my coffee yet. I'm expecting an Evite from this person. Something looks off. I closed it, contacted her. Turns out someone had gotten into her email. She had a very weak email password. They were savvy enough to monitor her email traffic, know that she was planning a party, and look into her contacts and send an Evite to someone who was expecting one. Of course, what they sent was malicious in nature, and the bad stuff would have happened had I supplied my Google or Apple username and password. And I bring that up because we're seeing the same thing happen to many others. I mean, I'm seeing in my role at Schwab situations where an employee at a firm that we work with might get an email from someone that they typically correspond with, and almost the exact same MO. The person they're expecting to hear from doesn't know it, but his or her email has been compromised. So the recipient has their guard down. They expect to hear from this individual, but because there's a bad actor who's gotten in the middle, there can easily be an attachment or a link that is malicious and that can result in data compromise, email account takeover, all sorts of things. So I'll leave it at that and invite Paul to jump in with a story or anecdote that he's seeing in his part of the country. And then we've got some data to back it up. So we'll come back to this.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. And Patrick's right. The data that we see, literally, we're on an email on a monthly basis where we see those incidents and how they start, and sort of a little description of the scenario. They pretty much all can be traced back to some sort of inbound phishing email that the recipient has engaged with. And just to set the stage on what phishing email is. This is simply an email that is it's designed to get you to engage with it. It's obviously looking very convincing these days. We used to be able to spot them very easily back in the day with misspellings and grammar mistakes. But now they are they're perfect language, perfect English. Branding is spot on, and so a lot of times these bad actors are taking advantage of things in the media or things that are happening in the world. Tax season, we see a lot of that during the shopping season, the holiday season coming up. Guess what? You're going to probably see some Amazon versions of phishing or some delivery UPS type situations. So the content is great, and so that forces us all to really study up on what that email is all about. And Patrick and I have a colleague who uses a phrase, you should expect that, or that every email is essentially guilty until you can prove that it's innocent. I know that sounds drastic, but it's truly true, because the content of those emails are really good, and the way you have to sort of clear it and investigate it is you have to spend some time looking at that email. I know Patrick mentioned that Evite, when he clicked on that link, he studied it, and it was a gut check for him, right? And it was a good thing. That's also something that you should follow, is if it doesn't feel right or sound right, it's probably not right. So trust your gut. But take a look at that email. Look at the recipient. Where did it come from? Does it match? Is it spelled right? The content of the email will likely contain a link, or maybe it's a phone number that they want you to call and take action on. Hovering over that link will certainly show you where it's sending you. So if the URL doesn't make sense, make sure you're paying attention to that. And then there are sometimes going to be attachments to that email. So it could be an attachment that looks familiar, right? Like an Excel document or a PDF, or it could be something that is unfamiliar. And that's the challenge, right? Because you may be expecting this or looking for this, and so it is kind of tempting to want to click on those attachments. And so that's the thing you need to start to study up on, is to pay attention to what's in that email. Patrick, I think you were going to add to it.
Yeah, I want to add on, and Chad, I'm wondering if you can put up the second poll, the one about recognizing phishing. It'll be interesting for folks to consider that. I'll just point out a couple other cases. The risks that we're describing have gotten a lot of publicity. Last year, there were a couple of movies that came out, both around summertime. One was The Beekeeper. A woman gets phishing in the form of an IT support pop-up telling her that her antivirus is out of date or something to that effect, right? And then there was Thelma, an elderly woman who gets a call supposedly from her grandson who's been in an accident or in jail and needs to be bailed out. I appreciate that these made it into popular culture, because our point of view is really that with increased awareness of what's happening, the risks that we face, we're just going to be that much more equipped not to fall victim to them. So again, at the start of our talk here, that'll largely be driven by your questions. I really hope that you'll be on the lookout for one or two things that really resonate with you that you can implement in your life. Maybe it's something new that you hear, or maybe it's something that you just hear again that you probably should have done, months ago. And this spurs you to do it today. So I'd like you all to think about that. What's your one takeaway? And then secondly, maybe you can also think about one thing that you think is important enough to share with a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, something like that. Yep. Two more quick examples, and I know we're starting to get some questions come in, so that's great. Like Paul said, we've got to slow down. We've really got to consider carefully before we engage with links and attachments, messages, whether those are emails, texts, even phone calls. The bad actors are getting bold enough to call us and to impersonate government officials, to impersonate banks, brokerage firms, and so on. Two quick examples. These aren't exactly household names, but Troy Hunt is a guy who runs a website called Have I Been Pwned? You can use this website to see if your own data has been breached and is out there compromised on the dark web. Well, Troy got a phishing that he fell for. It looked like it was coming from a company that he engages with to run his website. And in a moment when he just didn't slow down enough, look carefully enough, he put into a login screen like the one I got from the Evite, he put in his username and password. And he felt strongly enough that if he could fall victim for this, and he does cybersecurity for a living, that anyone could when we're not on top of our game. So he went public with it again to raise awareness and to help others. And someone else out there, Charlotte Cowles, is a personal finance columnist. She's written for some leading mainstream publications. Someone impersonated a government official, called her, used social engineering, basically every psychological trick out there, to manipulate her, to threaten her family, to tap into her sense of urgency, to tap into her desire to resolve a situation, one that in hindsight was entirely contrived, but in the moment felt so convincing that by the end of this long day on the phone with someone she was convinced was, from the IRS or FBI, she was handing over a shoebox with $40,000 cash to an SUV that pulled up in front of her apartment in New York City. Again, someone who should have known better. And so, point being, it can happen to any of us, and we want to equip you to be on guard against these things. And final thought here, it's not just the anecdotes, these stories that we're sharing. I just saw a statistic from the FBI that in 2024, there was something like 16 to 17 billion dollars of funds lost to cybercrime. And perhaps a more staggering stat, a lower dollar amount, but consider this. Just recently, because of a deluge of phishing texts that tend to originate out of Southeast Asia and often involve toll violations, over the course of just 3 years, according to the Department of Homeland Security, Americans have lost $1 billion in 3 years just to those types of texts. So let's look at this here. The phishing emails, somewhat confident, good. So we've got 86% somewhat or very confident. I would say fly fishing. I like that. I would say, especially for those of you who aren't getting phishing testing or training in the workplace, maybe those of you who are retired, just know that, these spam messages, they're not just annoying advertisements. They might actually be malicious and compromise your information and ultimately lead to the compromise or loss of dollars or funds. So really be on guard against phishing. It is our number one threat.
Hey, so I actually have a good one, and this might actually get Mike to come off mute too, to kind of talk about what they do when clients give direction for like a transaction or trade. But I think especially for this audience, there's some that are our advisory clients, wealth management, and a lot of people on here that are coming from 401k, 403bs, 457 plans, where we have a relationship with their employer and are helping oversee that retirement plan. And I think it's become top of mind with how easy it's become to make distributions from these types of plans with all the Secure Act and Secure Act 2.0 rules and emergency savings types of accounts inside of your 401k, et cetera. And why do the record keepers, right? Not just Schwab and the Fidelities and the Empowers, Voya, Principal. Why do all these companies make it difficult? And they want you to call in and talk to them to verify before they write a check and just send it to you. And I think, Mike, we probably do the same thing on the wealth side too, right?
Yeah, I mean, we verbally verify every money movement request. And one of the things I want to kind of throw back at Patrick and Paul is with kind of the deep fakes and voice mimicking and so on. And unfortunately, we've had, clients fall for some of these. We had just like you were explaining, Patrick, a client, their son called them in a car accident and he wired money over and we've had a couple other incidents, but we talk to clients, they can put in one. Everyone should be using two-factor authentication on stuff, and we'll get to that later. But adding passwords, you can do that with your custodian, like Schwab. You can do it with us as your advisor, some type of safe word or passcode or something like that, just so we know that we're talking to the right person. And so unfortunately with AI and where that's gone, that's something we're recommending now. So Paul and Patrick, any other insight there that you want to?
Yeah, Michael, I'm glad you brought up the safe word or a passphrase that you would use together. That can also apply to your family. So think about instituting some sort of safe word for the family, so that could be used as a way to to get in front of some of that fraud. And it's also a good reminder about just what you put out there in social media, right? So, if you have a public facing social media page, there's a lot of great information that can be gleaned from that, that can be used against you. So I'd say consider, making those as private as possible. You don't want to answer the question. I see those going around, and I'm talking about this because I know Patrick doesn't have any social media, but where we'll see the 10 questions that like, where did I graduate from high school and what street did you live on? These are all the questions that are typically part of resetting a password. So don't respond to those out on Facebook or in social media.
Yeah, and I would just add on the social media, I mean, if only share it with your friends. You shouldn't have a public social media, and go Google yourself and see what's out there, and try to maybe scrub some of that off the web if you can. So
Absolutely.
I'll pile on to some of the things that Mike introduced, and then it looks like we can go through some of the questions that are coming in. Thank you for those. Keep them coming. With AI, we're certainly seeing the ability to mimic voices. These days we can insert people into pictures, into scenes, into videos where they weren't actually present. But before we get too worried about all of this, we're still unfortunately seeing very low-tech fraud and scams take place. And so for those of you out there who like a good story, the New Yorker wrote, probably going on 18 to 24 months ago, a lengthy story about a gentleman who was in jail. This was in the southern part of the US, and he bounced around from penitentiary to penitentiary, and he was getting cell phones smuggled into his cell. And he was using these phones to call banks and brokerage firms, and he was mimicking clients, but he did not have to sound exactly like the client. He just had to match the demographics of the client. And unfortunately, this, I would say, very low-tech type of scam worked. And it's a fascinating long read, but it just goes to show, I mean, if he was trying to rip off the account of an 85-year-old man, he just tried to sound like an 85-year-old man, not necessarily that 85-year-old man. And when we're woken up in the middle of the night, and this is the example that I think I heard Mike also describe, or Paul too, there's a young woman I know in her 30s, bright young financial professional. She was woken up in the middle of the night by someone claiming to be her sister. She should know better. There's no diminished capacity here, but the person on the other end of the line didn't necessarily sound exactly like her sister. No one had used voice mimicking AI software to get that close. It just sounded like a young woman who could have been her sister, who could have been in a car accident, which might have been why the voice wasn't exactly the same. And at 2 a.m, when you're woken up, this young lady ended up buying a couple gift cards. It wasn't until, the call ended that she realized what had happened. So just goes to show any of us, when we're not on top of our game, can fall for this. And I hope this awareness just helps all of us.
Cool. So let me get to some of these questions. I think we got 5 in there. I'm going to start with one from Q&A, then I'm going to go over to the chat box. But I'm mentally organizing them because I feel like there's a little bit of a flow to it too. But I think the first one from the Q&A box is just if you get an email or a call that says to call a phone number back, I mean, should we be Googling and making sure these phone numbers are legit rather than just calling the phone number in that email? Or,
Absolutely.
I mean, what I always hear is like, just go to the company's website. Like if I need to call Schwab, don't call the number in the email, go to Schwab's website and find contact us.
Absolutely. What I appreciate about the question is that the answer is just about in the question itself. Because the person who asked it is talking about calling back. And really, that's the most powerful thing you can do. If you're on the receiving end of a call and you actually pick it up, there's just greater likelihood that it is fraud or is a scam, or at least could be. So when you are actively calling back at a number that you verify, that's really the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
I know I'm quoting all these stories out there, but there was also a good read by another journalist in the New York Times about 3-4 weeks ago at this point. And he wrote about his experience of receiving a phone call. And ultimately, it was supposed to be the Chase Bank in Times Square. Maybe some of you read this article, this story. And, ultimately he hung up and called back. And because the fraudster was on the line saying, yeah, you can look up right now, the number in your caller ID is the Chase Bank in Times Square. And it's so easy to spoof caller ID. So the best thing you can do, hang up, call back a known number.
Yep. So I think this next one is coming from the chat box instead, but I think it might clear up like a myth. Like, is it possible to get scammed just by opening the message or email? Or is it always going to ask you to do something, right? Like click a link or download an attachment, whatever type of file, like, or is it like every email opens up in my Outlook window pane, right? And I feel like you're not getting scammed by the Outlook window pane, but the moment you type credentials.
Yeah.
I appreciate the question. I'll say that, for those of us who follow information security trends and practices and spyware, there are some cases of what's called no-click types of compromises, but these mostly are used by nation states, by sovereign countries that can afford very sophisticated software, and they send typically text messages to people they are targeting. And so in those cases, there are some examples of no-click. But for the vast majority of what's done at scale by cyber criminals, targeting most of us, regular people, you've really got to engage with the link or attachment. So even in my case, I clicked on the link. The bad thing wasn't going to happen unless I put in my credentials. Similarly, sometimes you've really got to engage to kick off some sort of activity as a result, whether it's the installation of some sort of virus or malware or something else, harvesting of credentials. There is something that we're seeing that people are referring to as RAT, or remote access tool, remote access Trojan. So if you are on the receiving end of someone claiming to be, I don't know, your computer company or your antivirus software company calling you to remind you to renew your subscription or something like that. In some cases, fraudsters and other criminals are using legitimate remote software to remote into your computer. They might say, hey, I need to see your screen. I'm going to send you a link. These tools don't necessarily get caught up in antivirus because they are legitimate remote access tools to share your screen, typically, again, for IT support to help you remotely. So these tools you don't want to install, and you don't want to work with people to install the software unless you know them and trust them, because these, again, are in some cases very legitimate software that antivirus won't spot and eliminate because it looks like they should be on the computer.
But I think the next one I want to ask in here is because, especially, it's near and dear to me because I use QR codes for everything these days. Including there's going to be one to contact us when we put up all the disclosure and stuff at the end of this presentation. And this question is kind of alluding to QR codes. Like, that's actually getting you to go to a website right off the bat. And there's no way to know that QR code is going to the real website or to a malicious website. Like, what are you seeing in this trend?
Yeah, it's referred to as quishing, actually. So
Okay.
So that is definitely an attack vector that is on the rise. We're seeing it sometimes embedded in a phishing email, that instead of a link or an attachment, it's a QR code, and they want you to click on, take a picture of it and engage with it that way. So yeah, I'm always suspicious now of anything that I see out in the wild, right? Because that's where you have to be a little more suspect, because if there's a random QR code, this is almost akin to the random flash drive that's just laying on the street or laying out there. Sometimes curiosity gets the best of us, and it's like, well, where is this going to take me? Or it says it's going to take me here. Let's see if it's going to take me there. So yeah, I would avoid anything out in the wild from a QR code standpoint. But now I'm seeing it like on TV, like news, my news, when I'm watching the news, they'll throw up a QR code, hey, and look for more information. So, yeah, just be suspect of them, and it's probably best not to use them.
Yeah, they're often done for convenience, right? During the pandemic, we all had to suddenly use a QR code to get a menu. And then often,
Yeah.
what I learned was it was just taking me to the restaurant's website, which I could type in, or do a quick search for, So the idea of needing to take a photo or hover my camera over a code just was ridiculous. But yeah, be choosy about where you which ones you decide to engage with.
Yeah. So this next one, and this is going to somebody who says, I'm not the most technical user. So, with how good some of these websites are getting, right? Like it's even like powered by Google these days. Like, I mean, they are replicating websites perfectly. What are you guys seeing today that somebody could still use to be able to, trust a website?
Not sure if I follow, Chad. Can you?
So I think, yeah, and you alluded to it earlier. It used to be like you have spell check, and you could find easy things in an email that make it look like this is not a real email, right? There's typos all over the place. The grammar's terrible. This person even alludes. I mean, the AI can make a video clip to make you sound almost perfect, and they just need like a 1 or 2 sentence soundbite, and then they can make you say whatever you want these days. And I played with softwares to try and see how easy it was, and it was really easy. It even made like an avatar of me based on like 2 pictures, and then makes me like move my hands and stuff. I mean, what are you guys seeing out there that might still allow, right, some non-technical people out there like yours truly too, to know it's a malicious website?
Yeah. Let me chime in here. I would avoid the sponsored or paid returns on a Google search.
Yep.
So what we're seeing there is bad actors are taking advantage of the SEO capabilities and just simply buying their way to the top of a search engine return. So typically, if I'm looking for a bank or a site, I always scroll down to kind of the meat of the results to actually find the URL there rather than clicking the first response, because a lot of times the bad actors are buying their way to the top, and that click on that sponsored ad or that sponsored result is going to take you to a, a a phony site, but it's going to look very legitimate. It's going to, have branding and logos, right? Because we're seeing that now. So my advice is, yeah, don't click the first search result.
Yeah, I mean, I just went to Google dress shirts because I probably need some new ones, and like you got to scroll halfway down the page before you get to the first non-sponsored right opportunity to go to a website. So
That's right.
And just to build on that, I think it's an important point that ties into this idea of spoofing in general. So we are unfortunately at Schwab seeing cases where clients have searched for schwaballiance.com, for example, or schwab.com. And if you happen to mistype something while you're doing your search and you search for Schwab with an O instead of an A, for example, there could be an organic search result pointing to that phony site. Or like Paul said, a fraudster could easily have purchased an ad for their fraudulent website. And, should you not be paying enough attention to it, you click on it, you put in your credentials, now they've harvested your login credentials. So it is a problem, and way to guard against it is carefully type in the web address into the address bar, put in the URL very carefully, bookmark it, use that for future reference. Try not to search for sites that you need to access again and again.
And Patrick and Paul, maybe the HTTPS or whatever, the secure websites that have any play as well, maybe comment on that. And then I don't know, also just searches within now AI, Chat GPT, and so on, like versus Google, like is getting around that search engine optimization pain to get at the top. I don't know if that has any bearing as well.
Yeah, great questions and additions. So Paul mentioned SEO, search engine optimization. I would say that using generative AI and using results that come in the response from the AI tool are not going to be necessarily any safer, because now there's a rush to optimize how you appear as a company in AI results. So the same thing is really at play, and they could be manipulated as well. But HTTPS, making sure that you are on an encrypted connection to the website is one good thing to look for. And depending on your browser, often you can click somewhere next to the address line for information about your connection. And it might even tell you, depending on your browser and its settings, if there's any suspicion about the website itself, if the connection's not secure or anything like that. So it could be worth adjusting your browser settings, especially if you're not very technical, to err on the side of caution and have the browser do a little more um, analysis of where you're connecting so it can alert you to potential problems.
Oh, Chad, you're on mute.
So we got a few more on phishing types, but I have one that like I get all the time now too, and just about suspected spam calls. And I feel like it's great that my phone usually tells me it's probably spam because I could just ignore it all the time. But I feel like I used to get one every couple days, and now it's like I get one every 25 minutes. Are you guys seeing that trend, and like, how much of them are really spam, and how good are our phones about actually knowing about it? And any way you guys know to get rid of it, because there used to be a do not call list. I feel like that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I think it still does exist, but you have to like refresh it continually. But yeah, I think some of this is dependent on your demographic, where I think maybe all of us on this call are more inclined to just let it go to voicemail and not answer it. And it seems like the older generation is always willing to answer those calls. Our mobile carriers do a pretty good job of helping identify those inbound calls where may say spam risk or such. If you don't answer it and you just let it go to voicemail, and sometimes they leave a voicemail, great. You can usually spot those, or even if they don't leave a voicemail, you can just go in and report it as spam, and it will block it for you going forward. But other than that, I don't think there's an easy button to get rid of those.
I think I got the same question, but for emails. Like, any ideas, for how to stop spoofing coming? I feel like the answer is no. That's why we're having a call like this today. But like any you're familiar with?
It's similar. It's a similar response. Typically, depending on your email service that you're using, it will learn if you move those into a spam or a junk folder over time. And sometimes it'll slow it down, but sometimes it doesn't. What you want to avoid though is the unsubscribe. So that's something to not click on. And if it's an email that you want to unsubscribe to, still move it to the spam or the junk folder. Simply clicking on that unsubscribe just really opens you up to some bit of risk, right? Because it's not just click the button and it goes away. It's usually they ask for some more information. They want confirm your email address. All you're doing is highlighting that, hey, this is a good email account. Somebody's on the other end and they're paying attention. So now you're likely receive more spam because now you're a higher target because they know that email box is someone's paying attention to it.
I'm actually waiting. I saw it in Yahoo. I'm waiting for Google to do it in Gmail, but like in the thread, you can actually unsubscribe. Like Yahoo will help you unsubscribe now. I don't know who still uses Yahoo email though. That's like an old trash spam account, anyways. But so I think the next one, and this is along the same lines, but is there anything you know about how to keep people from spoofing you? Like sending to all of your friends and family an email that says it came from Patrick or it came from, Paul.
I don't see a lot of individuals being spoofed. We do see it in certain business settings. So, for example, not at BFSG, but firms like it, I've seen cases where someone can't get their email actually taken over. So a bad guy will mimic, say, Chad, and maybe change, I don't know, one letter, in the name to another. In fact, we're seeing this with Gmail and Microsoft. It's very easy for a lowercase r and n put together to look like an M. So that's one thing, that bad guys are using to spoof. So they're not actually, again, in the email account. They haven't compromised it, but they set up another one that looks like it. And in some cases, they do that in business settings to then send an email to a colleague asking them to do something, and the colleague thinks it's coming from typically a higher up. So they go ahead and do it. And we've seen some money lost in those situations, unfortunately. But mostly the bad guys are trying to spoof, the big companies. They're trying to spoof, the Schwabs and the banks and brokerage firms of the world. And we don't control who they spoof, so it's really hard. We can try to take down their sites and take down their operation, but it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole. So it's a challenge for us. If you as an individual think that you're being spoofed, I would take a close look at what it is your family or friends have received, and if it's actually from your email account, and you have to kick a bad guy out of it, that's going to be a matter of changing your password, introducing two-factor authentication. So I just look really closely to see if it's spoofing or if there's actually been email account takeover.
So the next one I have here, Jen's coming from the Q&A box is, can you talk a little bit about how these criminals and fraudsters are even getting access to people's personal information? Not to, probably put out there like we all put it up for free on social media anyways. So when you post a picture of your dog, people know that's the name of your first pet. But
yeah. Let me take a stab at it, and then Patrick, you chime in. So, a lot of this there is just been captured and curated through data brokers over the years. Sometimes that information is then exposed or stolen, and it's available on the dark web. And just so everyone knows that the dark web is where all the bad stuff happens on the internet, and that's where these criminals are working. And so if there's information out there on the dark web, that's likely where they're getting some of it, or maybe it's from a previous breach where whoever stole that information originally is now posting it out and trying to sell it. We see that a lot with passwords and credentials that are sitting out there. So what the fraudsters will do is they'll buy all of those usernames and passwords, and they will they'll take them and use them on various sites. And the reason they're doing that is because they know that we're terrible at managing our passwords, and that we tend to use the same password for multiple sites. And so that type of attack is what we call a credential replay attack. And that's something that we used to track more frequently than we do now. But the one of the stats right before we kind of stopped tracking because it was so prevalent, we had over 1 billion attempts on just the Schwab domain. So that's what's happening to the information. Is it's some of that is just trying to gain access to sites, but also to take over your identity and to steal your identity, and then take opening lines of credit and taking advantage of your financial life. Patrick, I think you were gonna add to there.
Yeah,
I was
I think
also-
this
Oh,
is
go
an
ahead.
important. It's an important time to recognize that to some extent, although we want to put up great perimeter defenses and keep the bad guys out of our networks, devices, and accounts, to some extent, our information's out there. Each and every one of us has probably gotten one of those letters in the mail saying that, any place from credit card company to a hotel that you checked into once has somehow had a breach and your information might be out there. So if we just acknowledge to some extent our information is out there, then we can shift to, well, what do we do about it to make it as hard as possible for anyone to do anything bad with it? And I was actually down in Orange County doing an event just like this, but in person. And then I flew home to the Bay Area that evening. And because I had just flown in, we were having dinner a little later than usual. And my wife started getting alerts on her phone that her social security number had been compromised. She's got a credit card company that looks on the dark web for these sorts of things. And I thought, I was just down there talking to an audience, much like you, about doing things like freezing your credit, and I've not done it. So, we just jumped on it, and we paused dinner prep for a moment. I thought, oh, great, this is going to be like a 3-hour ordeal. I tell you, in 17 minutes, we had logged in for the first time, set up a username and password for each of the 3 credit bureaus, and froze my wife's credit. And then she resumed dinner prep, and I followed suit. I did the same thing for myself. It's reasonable, it's sensible, it's easier than ever. And by the way, there are some other ancillary benefits. Often when new accounts get open, not just loans or credit cards, but new brokerage accounts or bank accounts, sometimes there's a credit check. Often there's a credit check. So if the institution cannot check credit at that stage, and maybe it's not you trying to open the account, but a bad guy, having the credit freeze can be yet one more thing that prevents, say, a fraudulent account being opened in your name. So it's just a good common sense step that any of us can take, and I'm certainly glad that I did that.
Yeah, let me also mention there's a 4th credit bureau to add to that. It's Innovest or Innovis, so INNOVIS. That's actually a 4th bureau that is commonly forgotten. So if you're doing the credit freezes, put that on the list as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a myth too. It's free to do that. You have to pay to get like a second credit report, but I think all of them are required to give you up to one free one every single year anyway. So you could actually get 4 every 3 months from a different bureau and get a copy of your credit report for free. And setting up an account to freeze or to lock your credit is also free.
And
you don't got to pay the Experian $25 a month for that premium unless you really want to.
Yeah. And it's really easy, like Patrick said, to flip it on and off, to freeze on, freeze if you are going to go buy a car or whatever. It's just an easy click of a button. One thing I wanted to add or ask and kind of have Kyle come on and elaborate is on just password management. Paul, you brought that up, and kind of what we do at BFSG, but I think what others can do as well on that of not using the same password and for every site and so on. So Kyle, you maybe want to add kind of what BFSG does there and how maybe others could kind of use something similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great lead into, some of the other topics we can talk about with regards to password management and multi-factor and things like that. I mean, with BFSG, I mean, we use a password manager and we've been using it for many, many, many years, for a long time. So we certainly, they work really well. They help you create random passwords. So you're preventing this problem of creating, using the same password at different sites, and you can easily have it remember those passwords. You can put in, if the sites ask for security questions, you could put the answers, and you can, if you're even more suspicious about it, you can put in fake answers, and then you have a way to remember your fake answers. So there's lots of, things like that could really make it, convenient. And there's a lot of popular ones out there. We at BFSG, we're using LastPass at the moment, but, it's worked really well for us across our firm and help keep all the passwords that we have and share across our firm secure.
I love it. And so Patrick, I just posted it. So it's new poll up on everybody's screen, because we actually, Patrick and Paul had me tee this one up, but how often do you update your passwords? And do you even use a password manager? I mean, I think we use LastPass at BFSG. I use Dashlane for personal stuff between, me and my wife. I tell you that it's only a pain when you have to re-log in on your TV, because you got to scroll through the thing, and my passwords are all 25 or 30 characters of random gibberish. Yeah. Other than the TV though, it's really easy because the password manager is going to copy and paste it in for you.
I'm eager to see the results on this one.
Let me end poll right now. I did put another fun one in here, by the way, but regularly, and I use a manager about 20%, about 50% saying occasionally, but I don't use a password manager. 17%, rarely or never. I didn't even know password managers existed. And then 14% saying rarely. My password manager stores my long and unique passwords. We love to see that. And then 2% taking the fun one. But isn't that what Siri's for? Or Google or Alexa? Absolutely not, by the way.
Let me applaud the 14% of you who said rarely, but you do use the password manager and your passwords are long and unique. So, there was guidance going back to around, 2000 that said, we should have passwords that have uppercase and lowercase and symbols and numbers, and we should change them all the time, like, I don't know, every 3 months. A few years ago, just before the pandemic, the same organization that was on the slide about the NIST cybersecurity framework, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a standard setting body, part of the Commerce Department. NIST, and actually the same gentleman who had presented the password guidance, 20 years earlier, came out and said, "Hey, that was good then when the World Wide Web was a lot younger and a lot of our the websites we were logging into capped our password sometimes at 8 characters. Then we needed a lot of complexity and we had to change them frequently. That guidance changed, I don't know, about 6 to 8 years ago. And formally, NIST said, you don't even have to change your passwords all that often. In fact, you probably should not change them unless you suspect that they've been compromised. Instead, choose a long password for every site you use. Chad, I appreciate that many of yours are 25 or greater. That's wonderful. I think of 15 really is the floor these days, and I'm typically around 20 to 25 and greater if it's a really valuable site or application. But if we make them long, that's a measure of strength. So length equals strength. You don't necessarily need all the symbols, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, all that jazz, unless the site or application requires it. But length will get you strength. And if it's unique, which is important because of the credential replay Paul mentioned, as long as it's long and unique, you'll be in good shape. And if you have something like 200 sets of credentials like I do, then Password Manager can be the best way to generate those long, unique passwords, store them for you, and other than maybe the TV, make it as easy as possible for you to input those passwords.
I'd go beyond that too, even just to change them. And this goes to one of the questions we got, like, can password managers get hacked? I mentioned LastPass. LastPass got hacked in 2022, a huge one. And I think they're still dealing with it because, right, a lot of people don't change their usernames and passwords. But when you use a password manager like that, people steal the data that's on their server encrypted at that moment. So if you just log in and change all of your passwords, right, then what the people stole is no longer relevant. And the password manager makes it really, really easy to change all your passwords too.
Yeah, and these are professional companies that are in business to protect passwords, and it's not typically I'm going to break in from the perimeter defense and then have access to everybody's credentials. There's layers and layers of encrypted security. And so even if there is a breach, it usually it's kind of a blip on the radar. And honestly, I think if you do enough research, probably every single password manager out there has had some sort of incident that maybe of note. But as you look at like putting all your eggs in one basket, take a look at your own password practices, right? If applying some technology is going to level you up on a security standpoint, it might be worth it rather than having that password protected Excel sheet that you have, or maybe it's something in your notes app on your phone. These are very specific examples I'm giving, so don't think that I actually did that, but maybe I did. But yeah, even my mother, who I worked several hours on trying to get her set up on a password manager. We eventually gave up because it was too difficult, but she has the little black book that she keeps all of her passwords in. And we talk about, hey mom, what's the risk of you losing that, or someone takes your purse, or so look at how you're managing your passwords today and evaluate it against using some technology to help it make it easier.
And Paul and Patrick, maybe you can add to, I mean, just the password managers in the browser. from like Google or whatever. Or I think on the survey we had Siri on there. Like, can you just comment on those as well versus like a enterprise password manager, like we've mentioned, the pros and cons, I guess, of that.
Absolutely. So, like Paul was saying, the pros tend to outweigh the cons here. Security researchers recognize that when we use a password manager, we're more likely to get longer passwords, more likely to make them unique for each site. And those two things really outweigh some of the risks. In fact, even though there have been some notable compromises, in very few cases have any passwords actually been exposed. So there are often other types of compromises. Um, Personally, I'm not a fan of using browsers to store my passwords, but at home I use a Mac laptop, and so on the Mac operating system I use Keychain. I have an iPhone. I do not use Keychain in the cloud. That's just my preference. So the two devices are not linked, and any password I want to access on my phone, I have to put into my phone at least once, and match it up to what's in my computer. But a couple other questions that have come in. One was about using something like Bitwarden. Yeah,
Yep.
that's one of the names that we see out there, along with, to answer the other question, some other password managers. Again, Keychain in my case as an Apple user, Bitwarden, Dashlane came up, LastPassword,
One
or
password.
LastPass rather, one
One
password.
password. That's the one I use. Yep.
Yeah, those are just a handful of what we see out there. There's KeyPass is another one. What I would suggest is that you look out there. There are review websites like CNET, CNET, CNET.com, PC Mag, the Wirecutter. These are all great resources where you can compare and contrast, what are the top 3 to 5 password managers you see repeatedly on multiple reliable lists, and go with one of them. Give it a try.
Yeah, and I would suggest too, this is something you want to pay for. Spend a few dollars a month. It's an investment in your security and your protections. And typically when you are paying for these password managers, you're going to have more flexibility around how many you can store. Patrick mentioned 200. I probably have 300 in mine. And also these pay services will get you the syncing between devices. So if you are always between your mobile device and a laptop or a desktop, it will sync anytime that you change the password. So you're always going to have that most current password. The password manager one password that I use, I'm part of a family plan. So here I'm able to share password vaults with family members, and we can share passwords together if you need to. Also, sometimes there's added benefits like a VPN. You get a free VPN, or it's part of the offering. So that investment that you're making is it's got some value to it, and you should consider spending the money because it's worth it.
Yeah, I think the family sharing is insanely powerful. I mean, like randomly, I get a call from my wife, like, "Hey, Netflix logged out or HBO logged out. Like, what's the password?" And now she just has the app too, so she could just go find it. So I think the next one, I'm going to come back. There's some stuff on like other app store stuff, but just because we haven't got there yet, and we have a pull for it. Somebody mentioned that they use two-factor, authentication. Now there's even advanced to that, multi-factor authentication, right? Just different codes and all that kind of stuff. Is it ideal to add that third layer, like MFA versus just two-factor, like getting a text or an email? I think a lot of sites are starting to require that. Like, just what are your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, and just to frame it, when we think of multi-factor authentication, we tend to think about something we know, and that's typically our password, something we have, and that might be a device with a random number on it or a code that we get. And then in some cases, something we are. So that could be, our Face ID or our thumbprint or something on our device. So as long as you're using, as long as you're adding some factor to username and password, whatever that extra factor is, it's going to add a degree of protection and difficulty for getting into your account should your password be compromised. So, wherever we'll just use MFA generically. Whenever MFA is offered, I'd recommend that you actually activate it, turn it on. It's a great antidote to password compromise. That said, we sometimes have choices. I'm a fan, this is just me, but I'm a fan of backup codes. Sometimes sites will offer me a list of backup codes. You can only use each backup code once. So I create a PDF, and as I use a backup code, I just color code it, highlight it a certain color to know I've already used it. If you're given a choice between email and texting, texting is not really thought of as the best form of two-factor. If it's the only option, go ahead and take it. It's better than nothing, but I tend to prefer email over text message, just because then there's this incentive for bad guys to get on your phone, to port your number and to intercept the two-factor that might be coming over text. Just beware, if you have multi-factor, don't fall victim to what's called MFA fatigue. If you're getting requests for multi-factor, if you're getting codes on your phone and you're not initiating a login, do not reply yes, do not share that code with anybody. We're seeing cases where, in certain situations, someone's receiving so many requests in a short period of time for multi-factor that they just click yes, even though they're not the ones logging in. They just want to make it go away. And guess what? Bad guy has your username and password. All they needed was for you to actually engage with the two-factor there. So just beware of MFA fatigue, but by and large, use it where it's available.
And I would
Yeah,
just,
Patrick.
oh, sorry, Paul. I was just going to say, I mean, having the multi-factor authentication apps from Symantec, Microsoft, Duo Mobile, like all those are, I mean, I've got them on my phone. It's so easy. I mean, there's a million of them, I feel like now that require, which is great again. But it's easy just to have one of those apps and have them all on.
Authenticator app. Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Patrick, you mentioned the porting of a number through your cellular carrier, and that it's a good reminder that you can call in and request a lock on a port transfer or a SIM transfer. So that's an additional layer that you can add to your cellular carrier, so that if for some reason the bad guys, the bad actors are able to get into your Verizon account or your AT&T account, we're putting in another layer of security there to eliminate that SIM swapping that tends to happen in those situations.
Okay, Jen. So the next one I got for you here, that came in a little while. I told you we have a good audience. They always ask a ton of questions. So, but this goes to that we mentioned the dark web a few times, and this person, a lot of credit card companies, Amex, MasterCard, et cetera, they'll tell you your information has been found on the dark web. They never tell you how to remove it. You guys know any steps to even start to try to remove it? Or is it once it's there, it's going to be there forever?
So I'll tell you, I've been told that we at Schwab, we search the dark web for our clients' information, and if we find it, typically for us to remove it, we have to pay for it. We buy it when it's on the dark web. So, but if the information is with a data broker, I've seen services that will do that process of unsubscribing or wiping your information from data brokers. But there's a ton of data brokers out there. It's probably a never-ending process, and I think that's why somebody figured out that this is probably a good business to get into. But as far as removing it from the dark web, I don't believe there's a way to remove it. I know, Patrick, unless you know
No,
something.
I'm with you, Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the hope would be that, they would tell you what information is compromised. So if it's, say, a password, for a website, you can go in and change the password so that the information that's out there is no longer relevant.
Great point.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, I always just tell people the first place to start is get on Google and type your own name, and you're going to see how easy you can find some weird personal things about yourself with a quick Google search of yourself. I think the next one gets to, this is like apps on our phones and our tablets. I mean, are you familiar with any apps that are just malicious these days too? Like, is that becoming the next wave of trying to download an app and you type the name a little bit wrong and now you have a malicious app on your phone? Or do we not quite get there yet?
I think we're not quite there yet. The value add of the app stores, especially from Apple and Google, is that they are vetting. They have certain standards. So the guidance tends to be just make sure you're downloading apps from a reputable source. And if you're going to one of the major app stores, you're probably doing what you can do here.
Yep. So I got another one. This is going to go two ways, one from chat, one from Q&A box. I'm also going to caution you because we're not allowed to tell people what to actually use. Like, what's your favorite email service, by the way? That's why I think when we talk about the password managers, we're all trying to throw out two or three because we're not recommending. We are suggesting that you look up a couple of them and do some research and find one that you're comfortable with. We all use a mix of them. I think you've heard like 8 or 9 of them today. But I mean, maybe go the other way. Rather than what email provider you think is the best, are there any that are just known to not really be safe anymore?
I'm actually gonna go with the way you think I can't, because maybe to say which ones are bad might be too difficult. Not speaking for Schwab, but as an individual, when I have family members or neighbors ask me, just for my personal email, I'm a fan of Proton Mail. But I know plenty who use Gmail. I think you're just looking for a reputable provider, one that you're comfortable with the terms and conditions and the privacy safeguards, maybe the spam filtering. But like Paul said, with password managers, don't necessarily use the free version. Pay even for the home version, the family plan. You'll get more features and you'll have greater control. And really the same thing's true for email. On my personal Proton Mail account, I don't get ads. I don't deal with a lot of other stuff. And I'm paying for services like spam filtering and all sorts of great features. So that's one that personally I like.
I would just add, I mean, Yahoo's owned by or AOL, now Yahoo. I mean, Microsoft Hotmail or Microsoft Exchange, Microsoft Gmail's Google. Like these are big companies that, I mean, again, not making a recommendation, but they're probably doing their best to filter spam and have those features and so on that Patrick just mentioned as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is making sure certain features are just enabled and in there, especially if you have an account that's maybe you've had for 20 years, maybe something wasn't turned on, like multi-factor, or maybe there's certain spam filters that you need to go into the settings and look at.
Yeah, Kyle, you bring up a good point. As far as we've had this Yahoo account for years, or you still have an AOL account. Back in the day, we sent so much through email that it shouldn't have gone through email. So as we look at email now, think of it as a postcard. It was never designed to be secure. Though there are ways to secure it and encrypt it, but likely historically, you've got some really good stuff in your email box. And if you were to become compromised, so the bad actors took over your email account and they were able to get in, they're looking for all that good stuff. So they are looking for documents. Think of that last PDF that you sent in with a wet signature on it. Think about maybe personal information that you're sharing over email with maybe family members or others. So all of that is what the bad actors are looking for to use against you. And not only where we're seeing them get into conversations or sending out emails impersonating you. They're looking for that information that's in there. So as just like a hygiene process, I would suggest go in and delete as much as you can and clean out your sent box, clean out all the junk boxes, and try to clean up your digital life a little bit, because that will also protect you in the long run.
And just what BFSG uses I mean, ask for files like those PDFs of statements or anything with personal identifiable information, like socials, date of births, account numbers, those so on. We have encrypted, I mean, links where you can upload those documents to us, and vice versa. When we send out stuff, we encrypt it as well in transit. So just add that extra layer of protection. You shouldn't usually be attaching documents with that information and just sending it out to whoever.
Yeah, so if you're working with, an accountant or CPA or financial planner, anything like that, you shouldn't be, sending them a picture. You shouldn't be taking a picture of your bank statement and sending it to them and just as a regular attachment. They should have some kind of, secure way to get that to them.
Yeah, I like Paul's comment though, guys, because I think you think back to like when AOL and Hotmail first came out 25, 30 years ago, like we weren't thinking about this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, it was uncommon to send a tax return via email. Like nobody was wrapping their head around the fact that I have my social security number on this form that is now going to be out there forever. So just, I mean, I love the idea. Clean out your inbox. If you have that 25, 30-year-old email address, like just think back to what you used to send before we started having things like cybersecurity webinar.
Yeah, and when it's time to retire an old device, get rid of an old iPhone or an old laptop, remember that everything that you've had on that computer is very much still there. And so you need to wipe the device, and there is software that can do this, can overwrite the device, essentially do a factory reset, but overwrite the device randomly multiple times. In some cases, people are physically destroying hard drives by, for example, drilling a hole through them. But whether you use software or you physically destroy them, you need to prepare them before you recycle them or donate them, just to make sure that your data is deleted. When you empty the trash can or the recycle bin on your computer, it's not gone. You've just told the computer that it can use that space if it ever needs it again. So you really do need to wipe the device. And there are so many other, tips and tricks. I'm not trying to wrap us up by any means, but just as a bit of a pause here, we've alluded to a lot of different things you can do. I want to point out one of the resources that, again, not a Schwab recommendation, but an introduction I make to family and friends who ask for security tips. Securityplanner.org is a great way to just reference. It's a Consumer Reports website, and it can help you reference things that you might want to do. So how do I implement a password manager, for example? How do I turn on my computer's firewall? How do I encrypt my new device? When I got my last new personal laptop, I went on securityplanner.org and just asked it to show me all the tips, and I just skimmed them all just to make sure I wasn't overlooking anything. So if you're looking for details about any of the things we've mentioned today, that could be a good accessible reference for you.
Yeah, I did just post that into the chat box. I don't think Zoom lets you copy and paste out, but you should be able to click the link and it probably just opens up in a browser that you can reference when we wrap up today. So the next one, I'm going to link two that are in the Q&A box together because I think they kind of tie to each other. But we've talked a lot about password managers, different software, right, email providers, et cetera. First portion is, what do you guys think about just internet security companies, right? McAfee, Norton, some of the big ones out there. And then beyond that, we've talked a lot about text messages and emails and how people spoof us, right? And send phishing emails. What about just pop-ups that show up, right, as an advertisement on your laptop these days, right? Like from a Norton or McAfee, like upgrade this or do that. How much are we worried about those types of things?
Paul, how about I get us started and then you add anything that I omit. So first, with regards to software, this is one reason why outside of the workplace, I started using Apple devices years ago. It just made it easier for me to manage my device security. The good news is, even now with PCs using the Windows operating system, they are easier than ever to secure without the need for additional third-party software. So let me just quickly touch on, on your Apple devices, you may not need third-party software. You can go into your system settings. You can choose to turn on your firewall. You can choose to turn on encryption on the Mac OS. It's called File Vault. And you can set up other settings, location sharing. You probably want to be choosy about who you share your location with. A lot of apps will ask for it. Very few actually need it. Fewer still give you benefit for it. So you can be savvy about your system settings. And I think the big ones, again, are firewall and encryption. With Windows devices, you can do the same thing. Again, you used to have to add like a Norton or a McAfee or something to turn on encryption or a firewall or antivirus. These days, Windows wraps them all together in what they call Windows Defender. The encryption part used to be called BitLocker. Now it's just, encryption within Windows Defender. There's a firewall you can turn on. There's some antivirus functionality as well. So I would say first take a look at what's available to you with your operating system. It's a good story these days, better than it's ever been, and you may not need third-party software.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments. I have both Windows and Mac devices, and I don't subscribe to any extra third-party technology. However, sometimes there's benefits to having those services. So weigh your choices carefully. But I think if you're getting the random pop-up or the some message is hitting your screen, that's probably indicative of something malicious might be going on there that is triggering that pop-up. So that means run an update your antivirus and do a scan immediately and see if it catches it.
Yeah, and if the pop-up appears to be legitimate, you can usually go into the app that the pop-up is purportedly from or into your operating system and see if there is an update available, and that's why the pop-up's appearing. So there's usually a way to double check that, but it brings up another good point, which is besides firewalls and encryption and strong credentials, one of the best things we can do to protect ourselves is to keep our devices up to date. So where possible, set your software from operating system to apps that you use to auto update when manufacturers make those updates available. There's a stat out there from the Ponemon Institute, which does a lot of research on security and privacy, that revealed that in a lot of cases where viruses have moved rapidly around the world, and people and devices have been affected by them, in a lot of cases there were patches available already for at least 90 days. And if only people had applied those patches in a timely manner, they would have been protected. And I'm thinking about some that went around pre-pandemic, like NotPetya and Heartbleed. In some cases, again, there were patches already available. So be diligent about updating all your devices from the computer you use to your mobile phone, tablet, and don't forget about all of our internet connected things that are on our network. Manufacturers don't always push firmware and software updates for these devices as frequently as they should, but when they're available, you definitely want to apply them. And I'm talking about, our video doorbells, our internet connected speakers, TVs, other things we might forget about, like thermostats. Geez, even a friend of mine in our fraud prevention team has an internet connected refrigerator, which kind of blows my mind. But anyway, think about all these things and remember to update them so they're not a weak link on your network. And by the way, you can also set up, in a lot of cases, these IoT devices to operate on a guest network. And in some cases, I'm seeing routers have not only a regular network and a guest network, but a third network just for IoT devices. So get into your wireless settings and check them out. There might be some improvements you can make around the margins there.
And
Yeah, I think
just so
for that
people
end
know,
too is
sorry, Chad, real quick. IoT's Internet of Things, just so.
oh yeah, we're an industry of acronyms.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd also think, especially if you get new routers, like I just got a new router, a few months ago from Cox, and it has 3 bandwidths now, right? And there's some apps still, by the way, and some devices like our holiday lights have to be on the 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth. And unfortunately, they weren't working with my new router because the router was always choosing Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 5, and these lights need 2.4 gigahertz. But so I'd go and figure out how to do it. But it's actually awesome because now I have our most important devices on the fastest Wi-Fi. I have certain devices, like all of our guests are on a certain signal too. Like me and my wife are on a certain signal for our cell phones. And it allowed us to be really strategic about how we're connected. But also, though, I think this goes to Patrick's point. Like most service providers, like AT&T and Cox, for sure, you can log in to the Wi-Fi app and see every device that's on your network, and then kick devices off. Like when I get a new cell phone, that device is gone. Like I trade up my tablet, that device should be kicked off the Wi-Fi just because it doesn't need to be there anymore. So the next question, and I'm going to loop again, two of them together again. And I think this goes back to, I think, this idea that I'm randomly talking to a friend while I'm, having coffee or at happy hour one night, and they mention some new shirt or like a Dodgers game, and I start getting advertisements for baseball. Is how much is that actually a thing? Like is our phone listening, and can hackers listen to that? If we're talking to somebody on the phone, like, is that a risk that people should be concerned about? Or even this person says, like, should I type malware or phishing into my browser just to go search about this stuff? And is that something that's now putting me on a list to target me?
I don't think searching is necessarily going to put you at risk. Your search website should be HTTPS, so it should be encrypted. And what that means is it's encrypted from your device to the server and then back from the server back to your device. So in other words, no one should be able to eavesdrop on your search terms so long as you are on an encrypted connection to that website. Just like when you're checking out for, an online merchant, you have that padlock or that indicator that the connection is secure. Certainly when you're logged into something like schwaballiance.com, you're going to see that padlock. You're looking for that with your search engine. Personally, as much as I like Google, I do like privacy. And so I use Startpage for all my searching. It's a company that basically just puts a proxy or some distance between me and Google. It actually returns the Google results. And Startpage is a secure connection as well. There are others out there like DuckDuckGo that do something similar. You
can also go incognito on, I think, Google to help. I mean, avoid those advertising and so on if you're wanting to.
I think I'm going to do this one in two stages, but they are similar from a question perspective. But so first one is, if you're using a browser, safer from your phone or from your desktop or laptop? Does it, or it doesn't even matter?
I don't think it really matters.
I would say, whichever one has been updated from a software standpoint. I mean, I every time I open up a Chrome browser, it always tells me, launch the refresh. So if you're diligent about that, it doesn't really matter.
Well, and then, so I mean, just from a safer perspective, I think everything's apps these days. A lot of times, even for your laptop or your desktop, you're using an app rather than going actually to the websites anymore. Is there a difference these days in using a computer versus a cell phone? I think I think even my parents still at this point, like they won't even pay their mortgage. They still write a check. Like I don't even have a checkbook these days. And they mail it in. I was like, man, your check can get stolen in the mail somewhere a lot easier than probably like my mortgage website. But is there a difference at this point
between an app and just pulling up the website in a browser?
Yeah, like going on your laptop or your desktop versus using your cell phone app?
I don't really think so. I think Paul brought up a good nuanced point about, make sure if you're using the app, it's up to date, make sure the browser and your operating system are up to date. But they should be pretty synonymous, or analogous. Half the time, for example, I'm checking my own Schwab account through a browser on my laptop, and the other half of the time I'm using the app on my personal phone. So I think they're pretty equivalent. And I think that's by and large true as we generalize that. You bring up a good point, though, just about the mail. I mean, I've all but gotten out of the habit of writing checks these days, and I try not to, because if you think about what's on the check, the demand account number or demand deposit account DDA number, the routing number, everything on that check is what someone with malicious intent could use to pay for something online or set up perhaps recurring payments. So I just try not to use checks. We actually had someone from the U.S. Postal Service investigative arm in to talk to us about how Postal Service employees are being, in some cases, bribed, and in other cases, assaulted and their keys stolen. So there's all sorts of mail fraud out there. And the extent to which we can keep things out of mail is probably a good thing.
Oh yeah, once they have your account number and routing number, I mean, your bank account can get flagged and just waiting for large deposits. Like it actually happened to us when we were buying our house, is when you aggregated all of our money to send it to escrow in one account, and like 2 hours after we put all the money in the bank account, like, and it's a Chase, huge bank. 2 hours later, the money was on its way out of the account. And unfortunately, like Chase stopped it, which was awesome. But had we not been paying that much attention because we were putting so much money in one account, like they were just waiting for more than $20,000 to show up. And the moment that you did that, flagged it. Okay, so next one I have is, we had one, do you know how a criminal can withdraw from your online bank? It actually goes to exactly what I just mentioned. But by sending you a link or click to install an app on your cell phone, like what kind of apps can do this? Where you click on a link and, like a criminal's able to now access all of your bank accounts. So I even think about what I just explained, like, I mean, how do they do that?
Oh gosh, there are probably a number of different ways. It may not be exactly as easy as the question implies. It could be a number of different things though. So for example, you could be scammed into this yourself unwittingly. There was a story about someone contacted by a bank, supposedly. Of course, it was a fraudster, but it sounded like it was a bank contacting this person, suggesting they needed to reverse a Zelle payment. And so they were being fed information and being instructed how to supposedly enter info into their Zelle app that would reverse money that had presumably gone out. This is not any sort of tech savvy scam. It's actually just tricking this person into doing the dirty work themselves. So being on guard against scams, where it might be more along the lines of what the questioner had in mind, something that grants access to your bank account, where then the bad actor can actually go in there and move money. So it might be you providing the bad actor with a multi-factor code. So again, we're seeing cases where people on the receiving end of an email or a text or a phone call are asked for the two-factor code because, let's say, username and password are compromised and all the bad actor needs is that two-factor code. So they might call you saying they are from such and such a bank, and there's some fraud on the account. They just need to verify your identity. So they're going to initiate a code to you. And if you simply read the code back to them, they'll be able to check your account. Well, of course, they don't work for the bank. What they're doing is they're putting your username and password in. And because you have multi-factor, when they do that, it generates the multi-factor code to you. That's the last bit of info they need. And if you provide that, they're in. So it's that sort of thing. There could presumably also be something like a keystroke logger. So with a click on something, what you do unwittingly is install either one of those remote access tools I mentioned a while ago, or some sort of keystroke logging software where the bad actor can see everything you're typing, username, password, even multi-factor code. And if they're looking at it in real time, they can use that multi-factor code while it's still valid and get into your account. So those are ways that I've seen people able to get into accounts and move money. But you can see there's a little bit of a process involved. It's not as easy as it might sound with the click.
Yeah, the click I think is usually kind of the first step of tricking you into starting to take the action that the scammer wants you to take.
And guys, just because it has been 90 minutes and we still have a bunch of people on here, but we only have one more, but it's not actually a question. So just a couple of things I did paste into the chat box. Again, just other links that people could click, scam prevention guides and stuff like that. That I think one of them even came from Schwab that we put on our website. Another one was part of our blog. But again, just other resources in case you guys have questions. Also in the chat box is a link to a survey. Let us know what you thought about the discussion today and whether it was useful. And then again, I did put that security planner consumer reports that Patrick mentioned a little earlier that he went to when he was setting up his brand new laptop. Now I got a tip. Again, our attendees are always awesome. And somebody had one more tip that we haven't mentioned today. But while I put that up, let me put up just some reminders for next week. And then I'll have our disclosure up here, but how to reach us. You got Kyle and Mike if you want to know what happens at BFSG. Next week, away from cybersecurity, back to normal financial planning, but budgeting and debt management if you have any questions. But then, so this piece of advice is to check and make sure that you've turned on privacy for all of your subscriptions, right? So think like your Netflix or any of these different apps that you might be using is, have you turned on the privacy section to make sure that they can't access everything else? And I think Patrick and Paul mentioned this, right? It's like location sharing on your phone apps. I mean, probably the only one that actually needs to know that is like Google Maps, because it needs to know where you are all the time the moment you start driving your car. But how many other apps really need to know all of your location? Like, why does PayPal need to know my location or Venmo need to know my location? It should be irrelevant to them. So I think it's a really good idea to go in and check some of those settings. And I love this person for commenting on that to make sure that we didn't miss it. And with that, anything else, gentlemen, before we wrap up that you can think of that we didn't talk about today?
Oh my gosh, there's always more to cover than there is time, but I really appreciate everyone's questions. Maybe just to add to that last person who offered his or her own suggestion. A couple things we can do. We don't need to have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi turned on our mobile devices all the time as we're walking around. These just ping and send out messages about where we are, and they also drain our battery. So we can be savvy about when we choose to use Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. We can also be savvy about our cookies choices. A question we sometimes get and did not get today was, what do I do when I'm presented with these options every website I pull up? Well, you don't have to accept all. You can reject all. You can accept essential only. Again, exercise your choices. And then just final thought, I'll say, I don't know that we did justice when you had the NIST slide up earlier. Just to reinforce why we're here is because we worked first with BFSG on a risk assessment based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. And I just want to underscore that because I think, in my personal view, this is the gold standard for any business to do, to make sure that if the firm is just starting out with the cybersecurity program or like BFSG, on that path and just looking for the next best thing to do to strengthen the firm's existing cybersecurity program, following some methodical framework is the best thing you can do to make sure that you're not overlooking anything cyber related, and that you have a blueprint for what you can do next to make things even more secure for the firm and importantly, the firm's clients. So kudos to you all for doing that exercise. We appreciate the partnership from you and working with you. And I also appreciate everyone's engagement today and all the great questions we got. This was really your time. So it wasn't all things cyber, but it was certainly all things cyber that mattered to you. And in that regard, I appreciate your questions.
Awesome. So with that, let me put up our little thank you slide. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for staying on with us. Going over 90 minutes is a long webinar to be here, especially when it's all Q&A and answering questions off the cuff and not a lot of time to mentally think about them. Again, so we definitely appreciate you being there to help support us and talk to our clients today. With that, let me put that disclosure for Mr. Albee. And thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
I hope everybody has a great day.
So long.
Thank you, everyone.